week? Were you able to watch the videos?
I watched some.
Okay, very good. So, we went some big concepts last week. We're going to do some review today. So, do you remember what exactly is a form? Can you tell me what a form is?
Not a mode.
Can you mention the four things?
The four causes?
Which one?
Okay, so we'll do that in a little bit. But first we did the form. The four causes was the last thing we talked about. What were forms?
Go ahead.
I believe form, is that the infinite, like eternal, like being of what something is?
Yeah, so can we name some forms? Can we list some forms?
You were using triangularity.
Okay, yeah.
Like a triangle being
Triangleness.
yeah, triangleness, you know, like 3 points.
How is a triangleness a form and a triangle not a form? Because triangleness is a form, a specific triangle has a form, but a specific triangle is more than a form.
One is more so a concept of the triangle, and the other is more a specific example of the triangle.
Okay, why are specific examples always more than just a form?
Because they have mass, like their physical
Oh,
shape.
this is a different word.
A different word. Okay.
Mass is,
More physical.
yeah, matter.
Matter.
Yeah, matter is the more philosophical word.
Yeah.
Why matter? Because you have this idea of triangle right in your mind. Now, through one concept, you understand every triangle: isosceles, scalene, equilateral, big, tall, black, white. Right? Through one concept. Triangleness, the concept, is all triangles, but physical, material triangles are always either isosceles, or scalene, or equilateral, or big, or they're small, or they're black and white, or they're blue, right? You have all these particulars. But triangleness, the form of triangle, is this immaterial concept through which we understand all the physical triangles. That makes sense?
Sure.
So the question, so because triangleness is immaterial, it doesn't matter if all the triangles in this universe cease to exist. The concept of triangle is always true. From the beginning of time, triangleness was true, and at the end of time, triangleness will be true. It's universal. The concept doesn't depend on actual triangles existing. Same with other types of forms. Blueness, right? Blueness is something we conceive in our mind. We have different shades of blue, but blueness is ultimately a concept in our mind, right? And we can have particular instances of blue. We can have dark blue, we can have light blue, we can have sky blue, but we can look at these different shades of blue, and in our mind we can comprehend them all as blueness, okay? This applies to man. We're all different humans. We all have our uniquenesses for sure, right? But there's one, because we can understand the concept of man, I can understand certain things about you and you and you without knowing all your nuances. I can have a vague idea of how you will function because you're all men. Okay? Man is a form. There's another way. So these forms are immaterial because you can't find just humanity. Let's put it another way. So man is a type of animal, right? But you can't just find animal walking down the street. You can find a specific animal, a cat, a dog, or a road. But animal, this idea, this concept, that many types, specific types of animals fall into, right? That doesn't exist in the material world. It only exists in the intellect. If it doesn't exist in matter, then this concept of animal must be immaterial. This concept of triangleness must be immaterial. And that's how we can prove that immaterial things actually exist. Immaterial concepts actually exist. All right. Any questions over this little review? All right, one more aspect we're going to review, the four causes. So there were four causes. There was, I don't have my computer because we're outside, but the first is the efficient cause, the agent cause, the who, the final cause, the purpose, the formal cause, the what, and the material cause, the stuff. Do you remember the four causes of the car? What is the agent cause of the car? Who made the car?
Henry.
Henry Ford. And there's multiple. In one sense, God made the car too, right? In a more remote sense, in a more instrumental sense, the man in the assembly line. He made the car too, but the way God makes the car is different than the way Henry Ford makes the car, and is different than the way the guy in the assembly line makes the car, right? But these are all agent causes. And we have final cause. What's the purpose of the car? Transportation,
Mobility.
exactly. And how do we judge the goodness of the car, ultimately?
How well it does that.
It's final cause, right? How well it transports, that determines how good the car is. Next we have the formal cause. And what's the formal cause of the car? We said blueprints, but this is not perfectly, really it's the form, this concept of car, right? We can...
Four wheels and engine.
Yeah, or you could do three.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, but so we had this idea of what we want to transport. We had this idea of this vehicle thing that can transport people, and we call that the car. Then we have the material cause. We can take different materials and make a car. Now you could have a gas car or an electric car. They're both cars. They have different matter, right?
Yeah.
The essential form of carness is the same. I guess you can have species of car, electric car or gas car, right? And really, gas car is another form, and electric car is another form. Okay? They're all both the same types that fall into the form of car, just as, trout falls into the form of animal. All right.
It kind of sounds to me like theology of the body also came from this idea as well.
So this is basic philosophy.
Yeah.
So really, any theology will have some
Basis
philosophy in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Theology of the body tends to be more in modern philosophy, though.
Yeah.
But so we'll do man now. What is the agent cause of man?
God.
Okay. Who else?
Mom and Dad.
Mom and dad, parents.
Yeah.
Now, really, but again, just like with the car, you had Henry, you had God, and you had the assembly line. The parents and God are agent causes in different way. And really, the truest agent cause is God. And the reason why is because man just makes the material. But we only know this through theology. The soul is immediately infused by God at the moment of conception. So it is most properly God that creates man, not the parents. And that goes into a whole other element. When you have a child, who does that child really belong to? It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to God. As parents, you have been given this special privilege to raise a child, instill in the faith, and prepare it for heaven. Sadly, some of the parents will see the kids, well, this is mine, that is my glory for my kids. There's a little bit of truth there, but it really needs to be, we are privileged with having this child of God, and we need to raise it to become a high in heaven. All right, so what is the formal cause of man?
God.
Oh, sorry, you're right, I said the wrong one. What is the final cause of man?
To love God.
Love and serve
Yes,
God, right?
yeah,
Ultimately. And how is man's goodness ultimately determined?
How much?
Loving and serving God, exactly, yeah. What is the formal cause of man?
God again.
What?
God.
What's the formal cause? Formal cause. Remember, the formal cause of the car is the idea of the car.
Yeah.
What is the formal cause of man? I have a board, it's easier to display this stuff. You can see them. But we're outside today. What's the formal cause of man?
You mean his physical embodiment?
Well, that's the matter, right?
That's
His
what I
body is the
thought. Oh,
material
okay.
cause. What's the formal cause? Well, we could say it's humanness, right?
Yeah.
But specifically in living beings, we'd say it's the human soul. It's a formal thought. So that's the thing we're thinking the theology of the body thing, really, where they get into there. And this is old flaw. This isn't theology of the body necessarily. It's just drawing from philosophy. Man's form is his soul, and you have the body. So just like a car, if you just have matter, you have the parts. If you don't have a car, you need the form. You need the idea of the car, and those parts arranged around that idea to have a car you can use, you can drive, right? All right. So in order to have a man, you can't just have a body. You need a body animated by a soul. The original definition of the soul was that which makes a thing living. So when the early philosophers were like, well, what is a soul? Some are like, well, it's water. It's not a point you have. I don't know what that means, but the philosophers are trying to understand this. Eventually we get to later, St. Albert the Great, and we realize that the soul is the form of man. That's eventually affirmed by dogmatic theology. So the soul is a form of man. So just like you combine the parts and the form of a car and you get an actual car, you combine the body and the soul, and you need those two to be combined to get an actual human being. What is death? Death is when the soul leaves the body. Okay. All right, any questions about this? These are complicated things, they're not simple, and we're doing this very quickly. So,
if you're willing, it would be handy to have, something written down, the formal cause,
I did it last time, but I will send you a link with it on a board, and you can see, because I do the card first, so the card's kind of an easy example.
Yeah.
Then when you do man, you can see, oh, I see how they're the same thing. Yeah, being outside, it was more difficult, but I will send you a link to it, for sure. All right.
I do have a question about it.
Go ahead.
I mean, I guess it's logical that the soul is the form, but it's kind of confusing because I felt like the form was the concept, the idea. How is the soul the concept or the idea of man? Is it because it only pertains to man, or?
Well, ask it one more time. Are you saying it seems the soul does so much more than just be a concept? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't really fully understand how the soul is the form.
I don't know. I think what you're asking is really a deeper question that we haven't covered yet. Like I said, forms are actually very complicated, okay? You can read Aristotle's Physics, which is like that thick, and talks about forms in there and really understanding forms, and then by that point you have a good start on forms. Now you have to read a Metaphysics, which is another book that thick. So the full, and also the Anima on the soul, which is another book that thick. So we're not going to be able to fully understand the form. Understand this in living things. Forms are much more than just concepts. The form in man is a special type of form that gives you life. He makes you living. The intellect comes from the form, not the body of man, or from the soul. So these forms do more than just provide a concept. So when we understand the human form, right? We're actually understanding that form in a limited sense. So the soul has power, it allows you to think, allows you to do all these things. Right? When we die, our body is separated from our soul. But we can still have thoughts and concepts, okay? The soul is an active thing that does things. When we understand the form of humanity, we understand the soul, we are understanding it in an imperfect sense. Okay, we're abstracting it. So in our intellect does not exist those powers the soul has when it's actually in someone. But in an imperfect sense, that immaterial soul is in our intellect. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. These are big concepts, so. All right, so today, that was an introduction to philosophy. And, act and potency. I'll go over that again because we're going to be talking about that today. Remember what act and potency is.
Potency, Aristotle brought that in to like be more than just a binary like is or is not. It's like an actual how much of something something is.
How much? It's a quantity.
Yeah, there we go. That's the right word. Yeah.
Is that the right word though?
I think we're going to need another class for that.
So potency merely means something has the potential to become something else, but it's not quite quantity. So let's look at potency another way. If you have gold, right, or silver, right? Silver can conduct electricity. Wood cannot. Why can silver conduct electricity? Because it has a potency to conduct electricity that wood doesn't have. If God wanted, he could impose in wood the power to conduct electricity, and it could do that. It doesn't have that yet. A potency is a type of being between non-being and being. When we hear this, some people think, okay, well, it just means something could do something. But it's more than that. It actually has the ability to receive something. Think of it like this, like a Mac computer has the ability to receive certain programs and run them. And you can put a Windows program in there and nothing will happen. Why? Because it doesn't have the potency to receive those Windows programs. Potency is more than just saying it can do something. There's something in the being of that thing that allows it to receive something. When something has potency, it has more being than something without potency. So let's say we take two pieces of gold, or two pieces of wood, right? One could conduct electricity because God gave it that power. Another cannot, okay? The one that conducts electricity has a power to do that, has a potential that the other one doesn't, has more being than the other. Let's look at the other example we gave last time. Let's talk about, brain dead people. Are brain dead people human? Do they have the same value as a person with an intelligence? To understand this answer, we need to understand potency, and that potency is a real thing. So if we were to just look at characteristics of something, what is that? A plant, this thing just has that behaves like a vegetable, it can grow, it can nourish itself, and that's about it, right? An animal, though, can respond to stimuli. It can move around. It's self-moving. A plant can move a little bit, can grow towards something, but it can't move the whole thing in the way an animal can, right? And the human can do more than the animal. He has all the a plant, an animal has the perfections of an animal, but more. And a human has all those emotional and visual perfections of the animal. He also has the immaterial intellect and the immaterial will. So the question is, if a person is brain dead and they can't even move themselves, don't they just have the perfection of a plant? And here's the answer. Because that human still has a human soul, they still have the potency to move. And they still have the potency for intellectual operations. That plant will always be a plant. It has no potential for anything more than that. So you can see how this potency in that human, that brain dead human, is a real perfection that that plant has. Potency is a real type of being. Okay? So that's what potency is. So everything, all material objects, are really in potency for something like this. It's in one location. It could be in another, right? It could light it on fire, it could change temperature, we could paint it, could change color. Everything is in potency to something. But how do things change potency? Well, material things, something in potency has to be moved by something else, right? So this donut isn't going to move itself. I would have to pick it up for it to move, or something outside of it, right? So it's in potential to move. But what can actualize that potency? What can make that potential an actual being is by some other thing moving that thing. Okay? That's true with anything. Does anyone want to object to this statement? What do you think? Does it seem like there are some things that actually move themselves? Now you could argue, well, what about man? It seems like man can just move himself, right? Well, in a sense, that's true, but really, man is kind of like a battery. He stores up energy he got and he slowly releases it, right? But his ability to do that depends on the food and water and energy he gets, right? He slowly releases it. So it's not that, boom, the moment something touches it's going to change. It's that it initiates that set of changes, those series of changes.
So the question is, maybe this is a different matter, but is there, in potency, is there an inherent receptivity, or is receptivity more of a nature?
Yeah, that's really good. So you can understand potency means you have the capacity to receive something. So like I said, wood does not have the capacity to receive electricity, right? So let's look this way. Gold does not have the capacity to receive greenness, right? It's always going to be gold, at least to my knowledge of chemistry. Copper. You leave copper out, it has the capacity to change its color from that copper color to green. Gold does not have that potential, right? And for that reason, sometimes copper is used instead of gold because of the beautiful color copper has, right? So, good question, very good question. So receptivity. So something can only be put into potency insofar as it's placed in by something outside of us. And that is going to be the foundation for today's class and what we're reviewing. Because today, we're going to be going over the unmoved mover. And you probably heard of this argument for God. The argument for God is a promotion. But people tend to kind of repeat this argument and not fully understand it. But it takes quite a bit of understanding to really understand the unmoved mover. So today we're proving God's existence. But one thing we're going to start out with doing is getting a clear understanding of God and what we mean by when we're proving God. So we're not proving this, that God is a Trinity and he came down and became man and died for us on the cross. We're simply trying to prove that there's this being out there that is beyond us and is causing us to exist. We don't know if he's friendly or loving, but we're just trying to prove that he's there. So you need to understand, God is, here are some fallacies. God is literally an old man with a white beard, a kind of stern wizard-like being with very many human thoughts and motivations, who lives in a place called heaven, which is like the places we know except for being far away and impossible to get, except through magical means, right? It's kind of the Greeks' understanding of gods, right? The gods were even unvirtuous. Some of them did terrible things. They were adulterous, and they weren't even people worthy of admiration. Okay. Also, God doesn't really have a bodily form, and his thoughts and motives are in many respects very different from ours. This is true. So he doesn't have a body, and the way he thinks is different from us. There is a similarity, but ours is vastly inferior. He is an immaterial object which has existed forever and pervades all space. But still he is somehow a person like we are. Now we have to understand, when we speak about God, we can never speak univocally. Univocally means when I say this is green and that's green, we mean greenness. We can also speak by analogy, right? We say he's as strong as a lion. Okay, if we measure a lion's strength and his strength are not the same thing, but in the way a lion is strong, he is also strong. You can say, exercising is healthy. Well, exercising isn't itself healthy, but we're speaking by analogy, right? Exercising is associated with health because it causes health. When we speak about God, because he's infinite and far different than us, we're only speaking by analogy. We understand goodness in an imperfect manner. When we say God is good, God's goodness is far beyond our understanding of goodness. We have persons, we understand person imperfectly. When we say God is a person or three persons, we are speaking by analogy. We can't completely understand the person in God, but we can understand our person, and we know that the person of God is something like our concept of person. God's goodness is above our goodness, but something like our understanding of goodness, or justice, or mercy. So that's how we understand God. It's called a prima negativa. You can't actually positively say God is any specific thing, but you can say negative things about God. So, well, he's like our goodness, but he's not our goodness. He's like our justice, but he's still not our justice.
So like, if we were to use the vocabulary that we learned, would he have like infinite potency and like infinite form?
God has no potency.
No potency.
God
He
is
is everything,
pure
yeah.
act.
Okay.
God is one single, he's perfect. So potency implies imperfection. Because
Okay.
potency means you don't have something that you could. God is one single thought, thinking himself the most beautiful thing. So if I had a board, you could think of the timeline of the universe as a circle, right? The beginning and the end. We're like maybe here, I don't know, but we're some point in that line, right? God sees time as that circle is one single thought. Through one single thought, he comprehends everything. And that's what we mean by God is outside of time. He knows everything instantaneously, perfectly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You guys did a divide by zero question.
Still, he is somehow a person like we are, only vastly more intelligent, powerful, and virtuous. In particular, without our physical and moral limitations. He made the world the way a carpenter builds a house, as an independent object that would carry on even if he were to go away from it. But he nevertheless made a side to intervene in its operations from time to time. The carpenter is, again, by analogy, but yeah. God is not an object or substance alongside other substances in the world. Rather, he is being pure, or existence itself. God is pure existence, which is not a philosopher, doesn't make complete sense. Utterly distinct from the world, space, and things, underlying and maintaining them in being at every moment. This is going to be some kind of heady stuff, but don't worry if you don't understand this on purpose, okay? The world is not an independent object in the sense of something that can carry on if God were to go away. So if God were to cease to exist, everything else would have to cease to exist because there would be nothing to keep them in being. It is more like the music produced by a musician, which only exists when he plays and vanishes the moment he stops. None of the concepts we apply to things in the world, including to ourselves, apply to God in anything but an analogous sense. And we discussed that a little bit ago. Hence, for example, we may say that God is personal insofar as he is not less than a person, the way an animal is less than a person. But God is not literally a person, in the sense of being one individual thing among others. Okay. God is understood by someone who has had a mystical experience of the sort Aquinas had. Okay, so when we're talking about God, we Christians have this idea, as I said before, we have this mystical experience, we love him, we have a really emotional affection toward him. That is a true understanding of God, but that's not the understanding of God we're going to attain from philosophy. It's just merely approving that he exists. God as Aquinas knows him to the beatific vision, okay? So, when I said we can only know God kind of by analogy, once we have the beatific vision, and that's the true happiness of heaven, we can gaze upon God. And what does that mean? Our intellect is enhanced, and we can begin to comprehend the essence of God. Something completely beyond man's natural power. You need an heightened, enhanced intellect to be able to do this. But we don't have that yet, so that will not be content for this book. Okay, so we are now on the unmoved mover argument. So now we understand active potency. We understand this concept of God we're trying to prove. Does anyone want to try to explain the unmoved mover argument, or the existence of God from motion? People have probably heard this before. It's common. Go ahead, try your best.
Well, according to the laws of physics, something can't move on its own. It has to be moved. It has potential, but it doesn't have energy until it's imparted.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can move the chair, and the chair's not going to move. But the existence of the universe out of nothing, the Big Bang Theory, someone had to initiate it. That's the argument.
Okay, and that's what most people say. Aquinas says philosophically, do we know that the universe has a beginning? Aquinas as a philosopher, or as a theologian, obviously Catholic, yes it does, we know God did. But can we prove it philosophically? He says no. But we can still prove there must be unmoved movers. This is where the way you explain it is the way most 99% of people explain it. But it's a little more complicated. Okay, so to understand this, you must understand essentially ordered series versus accidentally ordered series. I'm going to read from page 92.
I thought that theory was as simple as to say, well, it's like a domino effect, but there's gotta be someone who has the power to just push the domino and start that chain of actions. I thought it was just like that.
Yeah, but like thinking of it like that would mean like the dominoes would exist before the mover moved, right? Before God like actually caused the chain reaction instead of being like created by God.
Well,
But that's another thing, right?
Is God necessarily the unmoved mover?
I would expect.
Yeah.
Ooh. According to Aristotle, there are about 50 unmoved movers. And this comes from, so like I said, yeah, exactly.
That's even more
this
confusing.
argument is more complicated than people understand. Some of the great commentators like Cajetan was like, this argument actually doesn't completely work. But it's okay. You're thinking about this. You know what I mean? You're going into it. That's what I thought too when I first really studied it. But we'll go into some of the nuances.
Well, that's the physical description. I mean, her physical description was accurate. It wasn't about the dominoes.
Yeah.
It's about the
Movement,
action.
yeah.
It couldn't. The wind blew. Well, the wind then something initiated it.
Okay, so to understand this, but how does that work if the universe is eternal? No beginning, it just always kind of existed.
Well, wait. So how do we come to how do we decide that the universe is eternal?
Because we're philosophers right now, we don't know. We have like the Big Bang Theory, but it's a theory. Some physicists will tell you that, well, there's an endless number of Big Bangs, whatever. What I'm saying, either case, we can still prove God.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. Okay, so this brings us to a crucial distinction Aquinas and other medieval philosophers made between two kinds of series of causes and effects, namely accidentally ordered and essentially ordered series, known as per accidens, which is accidentally, or per se, essentially ordered. To take a stock example, consider a father who begets a son, who in turn begets another. If the father dies after begetting his son, the son can still beget a son of his own. For once in existence, the son has the power to do this all by himself. He doesn't need his father to remain in existence. He doesn't need his father to remain in existence for him to be able to do it. If we imagine an ongoing series of fathers begetting sons, who in turn begets others, and of course, which series really do exist all around us, and we can observe that in every case, each son has the power to beget a son of his own, even as his own father, or any previous fathers in the series, goes out of existence. Consider as a causer of sons each member of his series in the sense, independent of the previous member. So again, each son can act independent of the existence of the father. Hence, this series is accidentally ordered, in the sense that it is not essential to the continuation of the series that any earlier member of it remain in existence. And in the same way, the potter's curve, as his hand on making the pot occurs, even though his girlfriend's request happened a week ago. The causal link between the request and the hand curving is also accidental. So that example is some lady says to her boyfriend, "Will you make me a potter, a curved pot?" You have to curve his hand to make the pot, so on and so forth. This is an accidentally ordered series, right? And he can do this regardless of if his girlfriend's alive or not. But it would not exist, so we're talking about the potter, but it would not exist in the absence of the firing of the motor neuron. Here we would have an essentially ordered causal series. And we have one precisely because the cause, in this case, is simultaneous with the effect. The hand is held in the position is only because the motor neurons are firing in such a way. Take away the neutral activity and the hand goes limp. And once again, to make use of a stock example, if we take a hand which is pushing a stone by means of a stick, right? The motion of the stone occurs only insofar as the stick is moving it. And the stick is moving it only insofar as it is being used by the hand to do so. At every moment in which the last part of the series exists, the earlier parts exist as well. The stone and the stick itself, for that matter, only move because and insofar as the hand moves them. Indeed, strictly speaking, it is the hand alone which is doing the moving of the stone. And the stick is the mere instrument by means of which it accomplishes this. This is an essentially ordered series. Because the latter members of the series, having an independent power of motion on their own, derive the fact of their motion and their ability to move other things from the first member. In this case, the hand. Without the earlier members, and particularly the first one, the series could not move, it could not continue. Now, an accident, or any questions so far? Any confusion? Do you see how this is an essentially ordered series?
Yeah.
I'll read the essentially ordered series one more time.
So far we're talking about the action.
Yeah, accidentally ordered series versus essentially ordered series. So, essentially ordered series is when the prime mover stops and everything ceases to move. That's an essentially ordered series.
Mm-hmm.
So you can think, let's say we had 1,000,000 gears, right? Well, if those gears are moving, there must be a motor at the end, right? There is no operator. There could be some person with a hand, but there's some type of motor system. In the sense, there's some sort of thing that causes motion, that puts motion into other things, right? That's an essentially ordered thing. Now, an accidentally ordered series, like the Father's beginning sons, we get more sons. But in Aquinas' view, in theory, go back forever into the past, right? He doesn't think any such series does in fact go back forever. But he doesn't think it can be proved through philosophy. Okay, so he doesn't think it can go back forever because he doesn't believe with theology. But with philosophy, he doesn't think he can prove it. That is to say, it can't be proved and doesn't try to prove that the universe had a beginning. The reason is that since it is an accidentally ordered series, the members of the series have their causal powers independently of the operation or even existence of earlier members. There is nothing about the activity of the members existing here and now that requires that we trace it back to some first member existing in the past. But it's different with essentially ordered series. With essentially ordered series, if things are happening, there must be something in the past, right? That is causing these things to be moving. These sorts of series paradigmatically trace not backward in time, but downward in the present moment, since they are series in which each member depends simultaneously on other members, which simultaneously depend in turn on the others, and so on. In this sort of series, the latter members have no independent causal power of their own, being mere instruments of a first member. Hence, if there were no first member, such a series would not exist at all. If the last member of such series does in fact exist, then as the motion of the stone does in our example, the series cannot even in theory go back infinitely. There must be a first member.
Oh, wait. So he's explaining the argument that the simultaneously thing needs, because it's a fact, it happens on the present, then there needs to be somebody that
it doesn't have to happen the same in time. It could happen over a long time too. But what he's saying is that without the main cause, the whole thing cannot cease to function.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just want to make it clear.
Okay, do we understand clearly essentially ordered versus accidentally ordered series? How they're different, and how in theory you could have eternally accidentally ordered series, right? But an essentially ordered series, the ultimate cause of an essentially ordered series, what do you need?
An unmoved mover.
Right. Let's put that in another way. You need a being that is not moved, but has the power to put other beings into motion. Does that make sense? Now, material beings, all material beings, ultimately they're moving, something else moves, right? But only something immaterial. Since that's true for all material beings, this being can't be material, therefore it must be immaterial. So now we are trying to, anyone have any questions about this? This is not exactly a simple concept to comprehend.
I'm trying to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no problem. And like I said, it's recorded, and you can text me, ask me questions, call me if you want. I'm happy to talk to you about it. This is a hard thing, but in the essentially ordered series, there must be something that is immaterial that can cause motion and other things, right? Because it has to be unmoved what causes motion in other.
That's the prime mover, right?
Well,
And
that
the
is
essential.
Yeah, the unmoved mover.
Yeah, I mean the prime mover in that, not God, not a distinction.
Well, maybe,
God,
maybe.
man.
And not
Yeah,
necessarily,
maybe.
not necessarily.
Right. So there's a man turning a crank, and there's somewhere over here gears are moving. Right. So the man is the prime mover. of the activity that God created.
And here's another way to add to your, I think, probability confusion. You could have all this crazy stuff over here, and then other things would pop into existence over here, right? 1,000 years later. Well, in order for those things that pop into existence to move, we have to be able to trace their motion back to when they're moving. Maybe another 1,000 years, other things pop into existence, right? But if those things are moving, we have to trace their first motions back to them moving. And that's how Aristotle could say, well, maybe there are 50, I don't know how you got exactly the number, but 50, I think 52, unmoved movers that are cause of the motion in our universe. No, I don't think Aristotle was right. But can we think of something other than God that could be this unmoved mover? What would something be would be immaterial that could cause motion in things? Any idea?
But it has to be the first one, right?
Well, no. There could be 50 of these things. So, is there something that exists that is immaterial that can cause motion in matter?
What, gravity? Is that where you're kind of getting at? Or not really?
Boy, I think you can go that rabbit hole. But what exactly is motion? In one sense, you could also argue substantial forms. I argued this back when I was in a class a long time ago, and I think it works. But let's be more simple. Let's use what's living things that are immaterial. What is an angel? Can anyone define what an angel is?
Spiritual being.
Okay, so what separates man from angels? Man has intellect and a will. He has all the perfections of the animal, the plant, and the animal, right? And the stone, right? He also has physical nature of the stone. An angel is just a pure soul without a body. And unlike us, man is meant to have a body and a soul. Angels are just a pure form, pure soul. Man has the perfections of the animal, but also the perfections of the angel, that is the intellect and the will. If we were to chart these, you could divide it. Say, here's perfection of the plant, the stone, the plant, the animal. Here's the perfection of the angel. Man has all of those. So an angel is just a purely immaterial being. In Scripture, we see it with bodies, but those are assumed bodies. They aren't proper to the angel like they are to us. If you were to shoot an angel, you might appear to believe, but you're not actually creating it. Same with demons; they don't actually have physical form, though they can appear that way. So, in theory, these angels are immaterial beings, and it is logically possible that these 52 unmoved movers are angels.
Yeah, but weren't the angels created by God?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they were created before, I believe, the Earth was, right? So it's logically possible that any new series of motions are created by angels. So we're just using philosophy now. So forget what Revelation has said.
Okay.
Just philosophically speaking, it's possible God created angels and angels do the motion, right? It's logically possible. We were trying to talk to atheists to just prove that there has to be a God. Now all these prove that there's some sort of being. Maybe these are non-intelligent beings, they're just immaterial beings that cause motion. Let's say they're angels.
So angels are one of the 52 that he mentions? Or?
No. Well, Aristotle didn't know about angels. He just had these unmoved movers. I don't know if you explain what they just thought. At some point, you do have some saints talking about how the planets are moved by angels and stuff. So that was a theory. There were orbs and stuff that actually was proposed by people based off this. Obviously, I don't think they're right. It's probably just natural laws.
Saint Greg.
You can see why they would come to that conclusion. Anyway, so these things, as philosophers, what could be causing these unmoved movers, or immaterial things, right? The fact we're at an immaterial thing causing motion, we're still kind of a step beyond materialist. Okay?
Yeah.
We've moved somewhere. So what's the next step? Well, there's two ways we can go from here. The first one is Aristotle with the prime mover. If we look at the motion here, we see a lot more. There's the planets we see the order, and if these series, if these beings are working together to form this grand, there must be some sort of prime mover that orders all the unmoved movers. And you could call that God, right? The main intelligence is organizing all these guys. And overseeing them and in charge of them. Okay?
Yeah.
This prime mover really doesn't seem to be the all-powerful, all-knowing God that we refer to in Christianity. Another argument is, what exactly is motion? Activation of potency. That's all motion. Things move, one potency can actualize in terms of location. Motion can be understood in a more of analogous sense. We can understand motion to be any time a potency is actualized. When you say God doesn't move, you mean God has no potency. He has no act. He's pure act. These angels, though, because they're immaterial, they don't move in place. But they do have potency. They can increase in their knowledge. They can move certain things. They're in time, right? They can change in certain degrees. These angels are in potency. Yeah.
So, if we were to use the argument of God being the unmoved mover, like with an atheist, for example, and they might fire back with, like, say, Moses pleading for the Israelites not to slay them, right? And then it might become something like, well, Moses moved the unmoved mover. That might be an argument.
Oh, yeah, I agree. That has to just be understood by analogy. Like Moses, I agree, that's confusing. I don't know why. When I read it, actually, it's like, why did God put that in the scripture? It's confusing the way you read it. But we cannot truly change God's mind. God's mind was perfect the moment He created everything, and He did everything perfectly and foresaw everything perfectly.
Yeah.
So can you change God's mind? No. But what you can do is through prayer and love and requesting Him. God wants us to come to Him. Petition is a form of prayer. If we come to God out of humility and ask Him to do something, He might follow. He might give in because of our petition, of our request. It's like a loving father would give in when he. If his son's being a brat, he might not do anything.
Right.
You see the son.
But how's that different than changing his mind?
That was my next question.
Because ultimately he always planned to do that. So within the father might be, okay, the father might be like, my son's being a brat. I'll do it when he apologizes. He's like, I'm sorry, please, Dad, please. Okay, you were serious? You were sincere? I will do it. Always planning to do it from the beginning.
Right.
That's how God is. Always planning to do it from the beginning.
You expect the best out of your children, and you try to move the things for them to choose correctly. And
exactly. Same with Moses. Same with all of them. Yeah, that is a very good objection. All right.
I had another question too. Why does the unmoved mover has to be immortal? Because he has to be perfect?
Did I say immortal? Immaterial.
Immaterial, sorry.
So all material things are only moved when they're moved by something else, right?
That it's not material.
So all material things, this is really just modern laws of physics too. Something to be moved, something outside of it has to move it, right?
By outside means not material.
Something other than it has to move it. Well, it could be material. It could be one material thing bumping into another, right? You could have an infinite change of gears. You could have a chain of gears, a trillion gears lined up, right? And you have one motor moving all of them, right?
Right, but why are we setting that the unmover mover has to be immaterial? Is it because it has to be mortal?
Things always require something else to move, to be moved.
Right, they're imperfect.
What
somehow.
you need is a being that is not moved, but can still cause motion in others. There's no material being like this. It's just contrary actually to materialness.
Right.
Therefore, this being must be immaterial.
But it's because material perishes, right? It's imperfect. It has potency.
Potency, yeah. I would say perishes means like it's destroyed.
Right. It will go bad.
Well, even aside from that, that's really not what matters. because what matters, let's say you have a bunch of material objects that were just newly created, right? Without something that has the capacity to start the chain of motion in them, they'll just stay still forever. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was also thinking about how God became man through Jesus, but then I also thought of like, because like in the beginning the Word was God and the Word was with God, right? So I was just thinking about how like that would work into everything, but I think maybe it's because obviously Jesus was like material, right? He died for our sins. He was actually
fully
here.
man, fully
man.
Fully man, fully
So-
God.
Maybe his. Could you even say? I don't know. This is hard to articulate. Like if Jesus was with God and was God at the beginning, like did he impart him being the Holy Spirit as well into Mary and being born?
Remember, there are three persons.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sorry.
It's complex.
It's very complex. That's why it's a mystery.
Yeah, certainly.
So one element you can remember is that even though Jesus as God is outside of time,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus' humanity is within time.
Yeah.
His humanity was created.
Yeah.
And it didn't move and change and whatnot.
That makes sense.
That makes
a lot
yeah,
more sense.
that's
And
more
I think
clear.
so much of what we have in our religion is for us to relate.
Yeah.
So
Sure,
the
yeah,
way,
yeah.
The way it was, like the idea of the Holy Family. I mean, it's good for it's a great model. And it's
Yeah.
easy for us to relate to.
Yeah.
The part
Totally,
of
yeah.
Scripture says Jesus becoming man was absurdity to philosophers, and I understand because it's when you understand God. I mean, they can both
Except
work.
for the blood sacrifice, right? It had to be satisfied.
It had to be a human.
But this idea that the all-powerful, like when you're the Greeks, and you have like Aristotle, the all-powerful God, you're like, actually, that's his man. You'd be like, you don't even understand what God is. No, actually, they were right. But it's just to combine those, and the philosophers have done it, like St. Thomas.
Yeah.
It makes these people great. It's a lot of time. It's like so many years of theology to really develop. It's one thing to say God is man. It's another thing to really explain.
Yeah.
The Muslim philosophers, we got Aristotle through the Muslims. And
We got Aristotle
through the Muslims, yeah. Well, church fathers were all Platonic. They didn't really have access to Aristotle. It was the Muslims had Aristotle. A lot of their philosophers actually deemed heretics and executed. But they had some really good philosophers. And then St. Thomas translated Aristotle to Latin, and that's how Aristotle became a Catholic foundation. And now Aristotle is the main philosophy for Catholic thought.
So the Muslims still refer to Aristotle?
I don't think so. I was like, a lot of the philosophers are kind of like removed, and they were thought lowly of because some of them were actually heretics in the sense that some were saying, I took a class on Muslim philosophers, and some of them were basically saying, yeah, you can know God through theology, but it's better to know him through philosophy. Which, if you believe the Quran is revelation, that's not a good way to be looking at it.
Yeah.
But
I think that I never knew that we got Aristotle through
Yeah,
the
I
Muslims.
know.
Yeah.
And
Something good.
Aquinas translated it.
yeah,
Which there's one piece of history that makes me laugh about this. It's that Martin Luther said no one knows Aristotle more than him.
Martin Luther said that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That's humble.
Yeah, he did. He did himself. I can believe he said that. All right, so we're gonna go back. We're gonna finish this off. So, we now are. No, these are good tangents. In philosophy, tangents are great because it allows you to go through and just dissect it from a different angle.
Yeah.
Because a lot of philosophy, honestly, in like the physics, metaphysics, is taking the same thing. Okay, let's say it like this. Let's say it like this. Let's say it like this. You know, just a little different angle. You can see different truths. Really, you can't rush philosophy. You keep thinking about it. What about from this angle? And that's really how you do philosophy. It's how you understand these concepts better.
Yeah, perspective.
Okay, so where are we now? So we have maybe the angels of the unmoved moon. Okay, because a lot of people just kind of end as God, but we don't actually know it's as God. So we have the prime mover. Another way we can do this, if the angels are really in potency, right? If they're in potency, that means they're not perfect creatures, not perfect beings. To be a perfect being, you lack nothing. And we'll go over this argument later. But if they are these imperfect beings, then how do they exist? Did they cause themselves to exist? Well, if they're imperfect and they lack things, how do they get the power to keep themselves in existence? To create something from nothing requires an all-powerful being, because it's like the most impossible thing to do. We say we create, we don't really create. We take things already exist.
With fabric.
What?
With fabric. Fabricate. Yeah, sorry.
We reshape things, right? Make a car, but you don't. Even when we say, let's say, oh, I'm going to go to a laboratory. I'm going to make water from hydrogen and oxygen. We don't really make water. We take the hydrogen and oxygen, and we light them on fire, and the chemical reaction of those things is what makes the water. Okay? We just manipulate what's already there. To create something from nothing requires an immaterial, all-powerful being. So the fact that those angels are imperfect means something must have created them. And that thing that is required to create them, we call God.
So at that point, like, how are they unmoved movers if that's part of the angels?
Are potentially unmoved movers.
Or potentially, yeah.
Yeah. So the unmoved mover actually isn't necessarily God. It could be.
Yeah.
At least if you got atheists to acknowledge there's angels, you're making success.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But they could still say, well, that's not a God. Now we can take it to the next level and say there must be a God.
Yeah.
So we'll take that argument. We're going to do a few of these arguments. And so that's just one of them. We did a full analysis of it. I think the one from existence I just talked about, we'll hash that out more. That's my favorite, and I actually think that's the simplest one and easiest method to prove God exists. We're also going to use one of these arguments to prove that God is intelligent, which is the one thing is, well, maybe there's this all, like, you know what deism is? It's kind of this all-powerful being, kind of started things, it's kind of there. Does he love us? I don't know. Well, so the what argument? We can prove that God is intelligent. Alright, I have other things, the attributes of God, which we didn't get into, but we're out of time. Are there any final questions for today? We had a good course today. We covered a lot of good stuff. Any final questions?
No?
Alright, very good. Message me if you have any questions about anything. You can do call too. I'll take a call.